If you're listening to the Quarter Hour with Wade, chances are you love radio and podcasts, which works out really well for both of us. I have launched a podcast, another one is out there. It's called Behind the Mic with Mike E. Season 1 is out now with guests like Amanda Keller, Ben Fordham, Mitchell Coombs, Maddie Acton, and Lou and Jarch. I'd love you to check it out. Just search Behind the Mic with Mike E wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you, Mike. Good luck with your podcast. Hello, dear listener. Welcome again to the Quarter Hour. Today, a very special guest and a very important topic because music needs radio and radio needs music. So we're going to talk to the CEO of ARIA, Annabelle Herd. Annabelle, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, good. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Music and radio, it's such a critical combination and partnership. Right now, how would you characterise the relationship between the record industry, music industry and the radio industry?
Look, I would say it's fine. There are plenty of people in radio who are really passionate about music and Australian music. I talk to a lot of them. People in music are talking to them all the time. So I think, when it comes to maybe slightly more difficult issues between us, that we're in a good place to have a grown-up conversation about, radio's role in telling Australian stories, fair value for music as part of the content mix on radio, which is a commercial business after all. I think, people understand where we're coming from. It's coming from a place of caring about local music and local culture.
Excellent. And in terms of the most recent news stories, I guess, that we had quite a few around in the last month and towards the back end of last year, I know that you were critical of ACMA, which is separate to Commercial Radio Australia, for those that know, the Communication Media Authority, because you felt like your submission into the review of the Commercial Radio Codes of Practice was largely ignored. So what are you the most disappointed by in that process?
Yeah, look, I definitely wouldn't say it was ignored. It was probably the biggest recognition from ACMA, I suppose, that the local music quotas in the Radio Code of Practice are there and they're really important and they play a really important role. They recognised that there were a lot of submissions from the music industry, so we were, as ARIA, we were one of many. And that's because people care about these provisions and we want to get them right. I was most disappointed by the fact we spent quite a bit of time crafting some reasonable recommendations that would not be onerous on radio. We actually worked with people formerly worked with radio, content directors and such. We looked at data, we took a data-based approach, we looked at what was being played when. And our key recommendation to spread the quota over times when audiences were actually listening, we felt was a pretty reasonable ask. And the other ask, the big one, was really just enforce the existing genre categories, which is not changing them, but enforcing the existing ones, which ACMA has said it will do. So, and I suppose the other slightly disappointing thing was that they relied on the US Free Trade Agreement to knock back the day part change without really, I think that's questionable, that advice, but also let's just actually engage in the substance of the issue, not just hide behind the US Free Trade Agreement.
Yeah, it's just for those that don't know. I'm a reader of Senate estimates. I'm not sure many people are, but I do read them. It's just for fun. Can you explain
get pretty fiery in there.
Oh, thank you. Can you explain when the US Free Trade Agreement has an impact on this? Why does it have an impact?
Yeah, it's quite bizarre, especially in the current context. But the Free Trade Agreement has recognitions that Australia is allowed to have local content rules. And they need that recognition because the Free Trade Agreement is about giving equal treatment to American goods and products versus Australian. So this is a bit of a carve out to say, no, actually there are some circumstances where we can discriminate in favour of Australian content, and that's TV, music, whatever, radio. But they are quite limited. So, it's sort of set in time what was in place and said, it's harder for you to make changes that'll go beyond what was agreed back when the Free Trade Agreement was put in place. So,
right.
Yeah, that's why it's relevant.
So in terms of that and the impact it then has, so I assume then that the lobbying that you would have to do and other organisations maybe even commercial radio and audio, the lobbying is to government to try and amend or change that free trade agreement. Is that how it would work?
Well, I actually don't think you need to do that in this case. I think it's, there is a really strong argument that you can tweak the existing quota, because what we're not talking about, we're not talking about increasing it in this case. So as many listeners would know, the radio quotas depend on what format the station is. It ranges from 25% of all music to, I think some stations are 0. And what we were saying is, within those categories, whatever category you are, meet your quota during peak listening time. So it's not increasing the quota, it's spreading it out over the day. It's not increasing the amount of music they have to play, just changing the time that it's being played. So I think it's questionable that the free trade agreement prevents that.
Okay, sure. All right, well, and just on that too, because I mean, I listen to a lot of radio as part of this, but also, as you do, have been in the industry for a while. Well, and I, this is the classic kind of thing that's been a problem for decades, right? Is that you listen at 10 p.m. at night, basically, to any radio station that plays music, and you all of a sudden hear just a flood of Australian music. And I just wonder if, because it's been a problem for so long, I mean, I haven't got anywhere near a selector for 20 years, and many people would say that's a good thing. Why is that still something that would require a law or something? Surely a programmer can just decide to put music earlier. That's fair, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I suppose, and I understand radio is commercial business. It is a tough commercial business. I worked in commercial television for 16 years. I get the dynamics of content and the increasing costs and changes to the market and everything else. I absolutely get it. But we have some really amazing commercial hits in Australian music at the moment. That's new music. And then, of course, some of our older Australian music is just still huge. And the listening and the catalogue of bands like In Excess and even Powderfinger is now a catalogue. So there's plenty of really commercially successful music. And a lot of it's being picked up in the Radio Monitor chart. So Sonny Fodera obviously getting to the top of that chart recently is amazing. Without a quota saying you have to do it, I guess the people who are minded to do it, and there are people in the industry I know who really want to be able to do more, they sort of say we can't because the other stations won't do it and we'll be at a commercial disadvantage. And I think that's what the importance of the quota is. It puts everyone on the level playing field. And it's disappointing that isn't going to happen, but we move on. And we just need to keep talking. I mean, ARIA and the industry, the music industry, does so much across so many platforms and all the different ways that we need to promote music and get Australians listening to more Australian music. And, the way they listen is changing. But radio is still incredibly important, and that's why we're spending quite a bit of time talking about this, because we really care.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I just want to quote something you said, because I just want to ask you about what this actually means in terms of people who are in radio. You said that in Australia, commercial radio uses publicly owned spectrum to generate over $1 billion of revenue annually. That's a privilege, and it comes with the responsibility to surface Australian stories, Australian voices, and Australian music at times when audiences actually tuned in. So we've covered the kind of the timing piece, as in which hours music's played, but in your mind, how much of that responsibility falls to commercial radio versus, say, Triple J, Double J, who not only use the same publicly owned spectrum, but are actually funded by taxpayers and have a charter to do exactly that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody's got to play a role. If you have spectrum, which is a valuable public resource, and, I can't see this happening, but theoretically the government could take it away, put you all on digital only and say we're selling that to telcos or whatever because there's a market there. We would absolutely oppose that from happening, obviously, but it is a valuable resource that the public, has agreed to provide to radio. So there is a responsibility there. But more importantly, I think, we are all in the local culture business. Local music industry is, local radio industry is. There are so many changes happening in the culture and entertainment world at the moment. Digital disruption, obviously, we've been dealing with for so long, but now AI, and some of the changes in the code were around AI. We're all at risk of kind of being swamped or replaced with AI. And the only way we're going to avoid that is through local and authentic local culture and local connection. Radio is really good at connecting with local communities, but to be able to continue to do that, you're going to have to be authentically local. So it is a responsibility that, you know, people on public spectrum have. Same with television. Television has the same, in fact, very probably much heavier obligations than radio. Triple J is also a different audience. You know, it is a very particular audience. It's meant to be a youth network. Commercial radio has got much broader, more mainstream audience, and that's why it's still really important that it plays a role.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So yeah, we've all got a role to play, I think is what I'm getting there. And I absolutely agree with that. I know I can't talk about specific artists because it's probably asking you to name like your favourite children, but I just want to use a couple of examples here. So Lime Cordiale, who are one of my favourite Australian artists, they recently hit 100 million streams on Spotify for their track called Robbery. Now, by my rough calculations, the band would have only received about $5,000 from Spotify for a song that was released about 6 years ago. So it's not even $1,000 a year. Do you think the good fight is to be actually had more with the streamers? And if so, what are you doing in that space?
Look, I'm not going to comment on those numbers because that would be an arrangement between Lime Cordiale, their record label, and Spotify. And, you know, Spotify is obviously a really, well, it's the dominant music streaming platform in Australia, and streaming is how a lot of people are getting their music now. And we are also very much talking to Spotify and all the streamers for that matter, YouTube Music, Apple Music, about what they're doing to promote Australian music and get people listening. And you would have seen a lot of that discussion playing out. So we can walk and chew gum at the same time. But I think, you know, radio is still really important, and radio drives streaming and vice versa. So the ecosystem as a whole is really important.
Now, you have the ears of people who are working in radio right now. Some of them might be at the selector, as I said before, and they're scheduling music as they listen. So regardless of what quotas say, what laws say, what free trade agreements say, what's one thing they can do today as they're listening to this or watching this that you think will really help Australian music?
Well, look, I've not worked in radio, but people who have tell me that, you know, repetition is so important. We've got some great hit tracks at the moment. Just get them into the playlist, get them play, you know, interviews with local artists. I mean, these are artists that are on the ground. I'm sure in most cases, they're much easier to get hold of, get into the studio, providing great content. And if you haven't heard them, go and listen to some because, you know, artists like Sonny Fodera, but also Nina Geraci. I was in Cotton On the other day and Nina Geraci's hit iPod Touch was playing. It's a very commercial track, sounds like to me. She's an incredible artist who's on a massive upward trajectory, about to tour with Tame Impala. Yeah, just familiarise yourself with what's happening in local music because there are some huge artists and tracks that are doing huge things overseas and, you know, would be really appealing to Australian listeners. So just step outside the boundaries of the research maybe once or twice and yeah, just have a crack. And look, I just want to say there are some networks that are doing really, really great things as well. So, you know, Nick Kelly and Lauren on Hot Hits and Maddie Rowe, and, you know, there's so many, you know, as you say, I love listening to the radio after 7 o'clock at night because it's full of Australian music. So yeah, just get around what's hot in music at the moment because yeah, it's pretty exciting.
That's good. Well, I'm glad you called out Nina Geraci because I've got 2 teenagers and I was hassled like crazy yesterday to make sure I got Tame Impala pre-sale and Nina Geraci. So yes, we're all going, which is great. Last question for you. Is there an Australian artist, and again, I know you probably can't play favourites in your role, but is there one artist that you think commercial radio should play more? Because mine's Spacey Jane. It doesn't make sense to me that a local act, when you go to their shows and you see their following on socials and you realise the fan base they have and how much they're supported by Triple J particularly, I just cannot understand why a lot of that melodic kind of indie rock pop can't play on commercial radio. It makes no sense to me. Do you have a band or artist?
Look, Spacey Jane is a great example. The sound is so appealing. Their fans are nuts. Like they have such a huge fan base. It is a really great young demographic, which I would think, you know, would be appealing to advertisers and to the networks. It's always mystified me that Flume didn't really crack commercial. I mean, he got #1 on the Hottest 100. and didn't cross over onto commercial radio play, which I think he's won Grammys. I'm sure he's won Grammys. So yeah, that is a bit of a mystery to me. But yeah, there's quite a few that. But yeah, Spacey is a great example. Royal Otis is very similar to Spacey. They, another huge, very internationally popular band. So yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the Royal Otis airplay in the last sort of 12 months or longer has been for a cover they did of a Cranberry song. So there's a lot of original music they do, guys, that is actually really good as well.
I was in Italy a year and a half ago, but I was in a market and they were playing Royal Otis on commercial radio in Italy. So it was
on commercial radio in Italy. Wow. Okay.
And it wasn't the cover. It wasn't the cover. It was one of the songs off the album. So yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, Annabelle, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Let's keep the dialogue going, because I really feel like that, music is still a very large proportion of the product that is put out, not only here in Australia, but for people who are listening around the world, is that we do need each other and we do need to work together collaboratively. And as you say, for the most part, we do. There's lots of great support on both sides, but sometimes, coming together, as you said, to have a grown-up conversation can be quite helpful for all of us. So appreciate you coming on today.
Pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Annabelle. That's Annabelle Herd. They're the CEO of ARIA and the PPCA. So yeah, if you're sitting at Selector now, just add an extra little track today. Find one track that you think, oh, I really wish we could have played that earlier. Well, I'm just going to have a go at that. And a shout out to perhaps to Today FM in Sydney, who do a good job on particularly new and Australian music as well. But hey, we've all got a role to play. That's the important part. Thanks for joining us on the Quarter Hour today. New episode back again Tuesday. See you then.